usiku Bwana.
Hello everybody, my name is Clive Bono Mukundu. Welcome to the program Ask Mono, where I reply or answer questions coming from you. First of all, we would like to pay our condolences to the Manatsa family for the loss of the great Zexi Manatsa. He contributed a lot to the Zimbabwe music industry. Without wasting much time, we are going to go to the first question. The first question is coming from Tumai Masangano. He says, who is Mono, family, siblings, and children? The official name is Clive Mukundu. I was born on Tuesday, the 15th of September, 1970, in the small town of Rusape. And my father had two families, so on my mother's side, let me count. The first one is Cleopatra, the second one is me, the third one is Stella. She's now Mrs. Mamvura. And then the fourth one is the late Sharon Chipikiri. She was now Mrs. Chipikiri, and she passed away. And then the fifth one is Portia Nyarai. She's based in South Africa. She's now Mrs. Chikomo. And then the last one is our last born, Kakaja Tokamfana Kangu Denford. So that's from my mother's side. And then from my father's second wife, we've got Linda and we've got Audrey. I'm also married to Jean, and we've got two children. That's Nyasha Tariro, born 1994, and then Takakunda. Most of you know Takakunda because Takakunda is a musician. So those are the two kids that I have with Jean, and I don't have any other children besides those two. I know some of you were beginning to ask me, Akuna. Then I go to Brenda Mukoyi's question. The question goes like, which schools do you attend? Yeah, I was very nomadic. I attended 8 schools all in all. The first one was St. Columbus in Rusape. I did my grade 1 there. Then the second one is Kurai Primary School in Kambuzuma, where I did my grade 2 up to grade 6 first term. Then grade 6 second term, I was at Mutare Junior School in Mutare. Then grade 6 third term, I was at Victoria Junior School in Masvingo. And then sometime in Masvingo, after my parents separated, there was a bit of chaos, and I remember I ended up attending a school in Gutu. I don't remember the name, I keep forgetting that name. I think I attended the school with my sister Stella maybe for a month or so. And then grade 7, I was back again at Kurai Primary School. Then Form 1, I was at Kambuzuma High 1. Then Form 2, I was at Mkombami Secondary School in Chikwaka in Murewa. And then Form 3 and 4, I did at Mufakos number 3 High School. So in total, I attended 8 schools. Then we go to Patrick Matutu. This question was simple. Munurwa Musambo upi wakuru. We wanted to know which genre of music I play. Okay? I'm basically a session musician, somebody who is hired to play for other musicians. That has been my main job ever since I started in the music industry. And I'm a session musician, and I'm a music producer. So I play for a lot of people, and I play different genres. But when I do my music is never really blown. You know, what happens is, if you're a session musician, people just think of you as a session musician and somebody who is hired to play for other people. So every time I release my music, it is never really blown. But the artists that I play for, one of our particular musicians, but young in Ramba, knows how it is with the motor mechanic and winning a brarica. So that's what happens with me. But every time I do my own music, basically I'm into Mbira music. Some call it Chimurenga, some call it Katekwe. They've got different brand names, but it's all Mbira music. and I've done about 8 albums so far. And in 2013, to celebrate my 25 years in the music industry, that time I released one reggae album, because when I started in the music industry, my dream was to become a reggae musician. So my first 100 and something songs were all reggae music. But after I did some research, because before I entered the music industry, I did a small research and found out that in Zimbabwe it was difficult to make a serious breakthrough, especially an international breakthrough with foreign music. So just before I entered the music industry, I switched and I started playing Mbira-based music. And talking of my songs, here is my very first songbook. I started writing my songs in this book, I think that was 1986, somewhere there. So this is my very first songbook. It's still intact, but the lyrics are not because I was still a kid. Okay, let's move forward. Now let's go to Martin Baleni. Martin Baleni's first question has got 2 questions. The first question is, what was your parents' attitude towards your career choice? Yeah, this one was huge. The person that gave me the biggest problem was my father. But I want to state it clearly that it was not coming from a place of hate or oppression. It was because that time there were not good examples of musicians. Musicians were known to be drunkards, to move around, sleeping around with all the women, and they were said to be vagabonds. They were called vagabonds marombe, who do not marry and so forth. So with my father we had a huge fight. Even after school I wanted to pursue tertiary education, and he said you have to choose one thing. And I said I want to do both music and my tertiary education, because I also made a research and found out that it was difficult to make a living out of music in Zimbabwe. So I wanted to balance music and my tertiary education, so that I have a formal education and do music at the same time. But my father said you have to choose one thing. Between the two, I ended up choosing music, even though I knew that it wasn't paying that much. So that's one of the reasons I was not shocked when I started discovering money problems or financial problems in the music industry. I had done my research already. So answering your question, my father's attitude towards my career was very tough. He was very much against me venturing into the music industry. But so I had a mission to prove that you can be a musician and be a good father and be married and take care of your children. And I managed to do that. And I remember in 2001, I don't remember the date, it was in October 2001, it must have been 12 October. He gave me a call and he said, now you have my blessings. So I'm proud to say that I managed to prove to my father that I can be a good father, a good man, whilst being married, because I married my sweetheart Jean, and we're still together even up to now. After 27 years, we're still together. And his second question was, what advice do you give to parents of children who aspire to be professional musicians? I think parents should support their children, but they should help them in doing research and find out the pros and the cons, the advantages and disadvantages of becoming a musician. Something like, I think parents should tell their kids the disadvantages, especially the disadvantages of venturing into the music industry in Zimbabwe. Because in Zimbabwe, the music industry is one of the lowest paying professions. And for you to make a breakthrough in the Zimbabwe music industry, it's very difficult. And the people who really make a living without doing anything else in Zimbabwe with music alone, they are very few. I will explain later why it's like that. So I think as parents, they must encourage their children or they should not discourage their children to venture into music, but they should help them, guide them and tell them the bad side or the disadvantages, so that the children enter the music industry fully aware of what happens in the music industry and maybe teach them or encourage them to have a job and make music the side hustle until music can pay more than the job. That's what I always tell parents these days. Because if you discourage the children, there's something in us that always wants to go against rules. Some call it the power of the forbidden. If something is said to be forbidden, you are just eager to try it out. If somebody says you are not supposed to cough here, you just find yourself wanting to cough. So that's my advice. So we move to Dev Mtswedu. His question, I always get this question all the time. He says, you look like Thomas Mafuma, are you related? No, but we have the same totem, but we are not related. I have been likened to a lot of people. So one time I did a questionnaire on my Facebook page and asked people, who do I really look like? Because some people were saying I look like Bob Marley. Some people were saying that I look like Sanchez. Some people were saying that I look like Thomas Mafumo. And I remember when we went to Ethiopia in 2005, Ethiopians thought I was Ethiopian. And I remember every time they wanted to speak to me in their language, and I would tell them, I'm not from here, I'm from Zimbabwe. And they would always say, how come you look like us? And I don't remember the other people that people say I look like. So I did a questionnaire on my Facebook page, and the majority of people said that I look like Thomas Mafumo, but I really don't see it. I just know that my voice sounds a bit like Mukanya's voice, but facially, I don't really think I look like Thomas Mafumo. I don't know, maybe I do. Then we go to Patrick Mucheve. Here, the number of questions. His first question is, how do you balance family life with your music life? I'd like to say, if you are serious about your marriage and your family, you'll always find time. And musicians, we are not busy 100% of our time. Sometimes we are very busy. Sometimes the schedule can be hectic. But sometimes we are the most idle people. Sometimes you just sit. I remember when we used to play with Mtukudzi, there are times when we will go away for 6 weeks and play almost every day, maybe in USA or around Africa. Then when we come back, we'll have a time of resting, maybe 1 month without doing anything, especially in January. Or if we had Zimbabwean shows, sometimes we'll just play during the weekend, and on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll just be seated at home. So if you are serious about your marriage, you always have time. And I always tell people, especially my fellow musicians, that your family benefits more from your time than from your money, especially the children. And with me, both my children, from the time they were in kindergarten up to the time they finished their A-levels, I'm the one who took them to school. I'm the one who picked them from school every day so that I have time with my kids and speak to them. And with my kids, we are very close. And I gave them all the tips about life. Especially my daughter, I will tell you, this is the tricks that we men play when we approach women. And if you hear a man say, I'm going to divorce my wife, I love you very much, blah, 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 they'll be lying to you. And if you go to school and you see some of the most popular girls, boys, it doesn't mean that they are more beautiful than you or anything. What happens with the relationship between men and women, sometimes the easiest are the ones who are followed a lot by men. It doesn't mean that they like them or they are the most beautiful. It's just that they are available. And there's one thing that I always tell you, that prostitution or promiscuity or chihure or chipampe, it's not about beauty, it's about availability. Because I remember when I was in school, there are some girls, they were not good looking, but they were the most promiscuous, and guys were always after them. I remember they would dress skimpily, what they call today thirst traps. You know what a thirst traps is? That's when a woman dresses in a way to attract male attention. But what happens with that is that it's they receive sexual attention, and it's totally different from love. It doesn't mean all the guys that they follow will follow them, they love them. They just want to use them because they are available. So I remember I gave an example of a public toilet with a place where everybody wants to use a public toilet. But if you ask anybody, do you want to own the public toilet? No one wants to. So I remember every time I visited my daughter at school, the teachers would take me aside and say, how come your daughter is so different? How did you raise her? And I always tell them that there's a difference between raising a child and maintaining a child. Most people these days, they just maintain their kids. They give them everything that they want, but they don't talk to them. They don't spend time with them. So I raised my kids. I did not maintain them. So both my kids, Takakunda and Nyasha Tairiro, they are well raised. They know everything about life. Takakunda's first time to play in a nightclub, he was 14 when he joined Gerita. And I remember somebody saying, how can you let your kid go and play in a nightclub at 14? And I told him it's just a job. And I knew that there won't be any incidents because I raised him very well. And up to now, we've never had any single incident. So to parents, make sure that you raise your kids, don't maintain them. And kids benefit more from your time than from your money. Then his second question is, can you cook? What can you cook? I was raised in a family where my parents told us that you are not the boss. Because in most African cultures, the boy child is also called the father. So sometimes he's given some privileges more than the girl child. But my parents said, you are not the father, Panam. You have one father, so you are just a child. If you want, if your clothes are dirty, wash them. If you want to eat and there's no food, cook for yourself. So I grew up cooking for myself. That was the law in our family. But after I got married, I got spoiled by my wife, because my wife is a housewife. And I want to say to everybody, housewives are very important. That one is a serious job. And I know that people these days, they look down upon housewives, but I've got all the respect for housewives, because they raise their kids vega. I've never had a maid in my house, because my wife said I'll take care of all of that. So I respect my wife a lot for that. So, answering your questions, ever since I got married in 1994, I can count the times that I cooked for myself. So I think I've lost some of the skills, but what I remember that I can cook very well is sadza and tea. Then the next question is, you rate Chiwoniso as one of the best band leaders you worked with. Can you list the 5 best Zimbabwean band leaders, alive or deceased? Okay, that's a tough question, but to cut the story short, my hierarchy goes like this. The number 1 spot I give it to Chiwoniso. The number 2 spot I give it to Oliver Mtukuzi. The number 3 spot I give it to Simon Chimbeto. I never worked with Simon Chimbeto, but what I heard from my friends who worked with him is that he was a very good band leader. He was a very good paymaster and everything. I'm trying to look for number 4 and 5. If I find them, I will tell you. The reason being that in Zimbabwe times we've got some of the most terrible band leaders. And here I'm listing those who have been very successful, because usually before somebody hits the big time, before somebody becomes very successful, they are good. Everything is okay. But when somebody becomes very big, it's very few artists who maintain being good. And these 3 guys that I've mentioned, Chiwoniso, Oliver Mtukuzi and Chiwoniso, they became very big artists, and they treated their band members very well. So big up to those 3. And I moved to Frederick Todlan. His question is, who was the most troublesome artist you worked with? I knew that I'm going to get very tough questions. Okay, I think I've got 2. The first one was not the band leader. He was just a band member. When I joined Oliver Mtuku's, there was this one guy who really did not like me. I had a serious problem with this guy. I remember after the first tour, I came back and told my wife that I'm quitting the band because this guy is always making fun of me and he's always creating stories. And I remember one of his favorite stories was that I went into a bookshop in UK and I asked to buy some food in the bookshop, and he would make fun of me and everybody in the band would laugh at me. So I'm somebody who is used to speaking out when I'm not happy. But I noticed that the guy was looking for a fight. So I told my wife everything, and then she said, you know what, this guy is looking for a fight. And if you reply or answer him back, you might end up fighting and you'll be fired, and we won't be able to buy what we want to buy, stuff that we want to invest in. And remember, in Zimbabwe there's no band that pays more than Oliver Mtuku's band. And I said, what do I do then? Because I'm used to speaking out. And then she said, no, this time you are going to keep quiet. Just keep quiet. Maybe listen to your music. Every time he starts, just ignore him. So it was very difficult, a very difficult period from 2003, 2004. And then my breakthrough came 2005. What happened is Jairos Hamba, the keyboard player, joined the band after Richard Matimba passed away. And Jairos Hamba was very loud, very talkative. With Jairos Hamba, what you see is what you get. He wouldn't pretend and try to be calm just because he's a new band member. He was just loud, and he would speak, he would joke, he would sing anytime he wanted to sing. And that same brother of ours, he tried the same thing on Jairos Hamba, and Jairos Hamba was like, and then there was a huge verbal fight. And the guy would say, you know what, I've been in this band for a long time. And Jairos Hamba said, I don't care if you've been in this band for a long time. You can't say that to me. So there was a huge fight, and after that fight, that guy changed and he became a very good person. So big up to Jairos Hamba. He rescued me. Then there's Dumi Matombo Anokosha. His question is, do we still have music promoters in Zimbabwe, or we are only left with opportunists? Okay, in Zimbabwe we also have this problem where people mistake a music promoter with a sponsor or with a band manager. The duty or the job description of a music promoter is somebody who organizes music events, is the one who pays for the venue, is the one who pays for the posters. Sometimes he hires the equipment and so forth. And then he's supposed to get his money after the show. So for him to get his profit, he needs to engage somebody who is known, somebody who is famous already. Because I always hear people saying, we don't have good promoters in Zimbabwe because they're always looking for people who are popular already. Yes, that's what promoters do. They are supposed to exploit you for money. A promoter is not your sponsor. Is not your, and is also not a gender activist. Because I hear women say, how come on big events we don't see many female artists competing with the top 5 guys, and how come amongst the top 5 artists in Zimbabwe there are no female artists? That one is all, it's a meritocracy. You have to work towards that. When Beyonce is hired to play, she's not hired to fill in gender quota laws. She's not hired because she's a female artist, so that there's a balance, so that there's a gender balance. She's hired because she's popular. She brings in artists. We've had very popular artists in Zimbabwe. We had Busi Ncube, we've got Stella Chiweshe, we've had artists like Susan Mapfumo. Those artists, they really worked hard to gain their status. So they were hired because they brought in the funds. So a promoter's job is not to take somebody who is not known and then give them a show. You flop. Do you know that in Zimbabwe, I think we have got about 3 promoters who passed away because of stress after they encountered losses. I think we've got 3. And I remember the other time there's one artist that poorly organized the show in UK, and we went and did the show with Oliver Mtukuzi, and the show was a flop, and he had to sell his house to cover the costs. Because what happens in the music industry is if you hire me to come and play and I charge you $10,000, and if 2 people enter the show and it's a flop, I don't care whether you 2 people, according to the contract, I did my part, I came and performed, so I want my 10,000. And even if it rains and then the show is cancelled, the mere fact that I came to the venue, it means that I've worked, so I want my money in full. So if you want somebody who can sponsor you, look for a sponsor. If you want somebody who can uplift your career and give you career guidance, look for a manager. So for you to be seen by a promoter, you need to work and uplift your name. And if your name is big, if your name brings crowds to the show, why it will be foolish for a promoter to avoid working with you. So a promoter is not a sponsor. Thank you. I hope I answered you well. The next question is coming from Bongani Talent. He says, have you ever thought of signing artists? Ever since the dawn of digitalization, we no longer have record labels, and it is the duty of record labels to sign artists. Here's how it works. A record label signs you, and then they record you for free. It's not for free as such, because it's sort of like a loan. They are supposed to recoup their money when they sell the music. So they record you for free and pay for the covers, pay for the videos, and market your music as much as possible. So they get their money back from selling the music. Now, since digitalization, we had a serious problem with piracy. So instead of record labels getting their money back from selling the music, it's now the pirates getting the money. So as a result, record labels went out of business. So I do not sign artists because there's no way of getting back my money. You know, right now in the Zimbabwe music industry, we've got 0 sales when it comes to selling music. Because right now, as soon as an album is released, the pirates are the first to get it, and they duplicate copies. So every studio in Zimbabwe right now, they're just working on a cash basis, where you just pay your money, you record, you take your master, and you see what you can do with yourself. So I do not sign artists. Then we go to Elvis Wilson Nedzi. His question is, what does it take to become a good music producer? Okay, basically a music producer is somebody who is in charge of the production, and his job is to gather ideas for the project and to make sure that the project is sounding good. But with the dawn of digitalization, the role of the producer has been expanded. Right now, a music producer is also expected to play especially the keyboards, so that you help the artist to shape the music before session musicians come in. So the role of the producer is now expanded. You now have to be sort of like a one-man band, because most artists these days, they come to the studio without a band. So you have to arrange the music, you have to play the music, and shape the music. And then if you want to use session musicians, they will have to come later after the music has already been shaped, and then they will add their feel to the music. And you also have to be a composer. You also have to be able to coach musicians, those who can't sing, those who can't play well, and everything. So the role is developed, or the role is expanded. So if you want to be a music producer, I urge you or encourage you to learn an instrument, especially the keyboards. Because with the keyboards you can play almost everything, and then the instruments can be replaced when you bring in session musicians. And then his second question is, which softwares do you use? Okay, I use Cubase and Reason. Those are the two softwares that I use. I use them rewired. And I know it's a very technical answer, but I don't find any way to make it sound simpler. Then question number three is it possible to be successful when you come from a place like Rishavane? Yes, it's very possible. I'm sure you know of music producers like Oski. They come from a small town of Gweru, and when it comes to dancehall, they've really taken over. And they're coming from a small town, so it doesn't matter whether you come from a small town or what. If you market yourself very well, you'll be successful. Then we go to Shesby Chabaya's question. He says, what are your hobbies besides music? Yeah, that's a tough one. Because with me, I don't enjoy sport. I don't enjoy movies. In my spare time, I love to watch documentaries, educational stuff, and read educational material. So it's difficult to say what hobby I have. Maybe spending time with my family. Maybe that's my hobby. I can't think of anything else. Then we go to Harold Masanyenga, and he says, of the current artists, who do you think has a future? Okay, yeah, that's a tough one. The problem is with music, you can pick an artist and say this artist has got a future based on the talent that they have. But the problem is with the music industry, talent is not enough. You can be very talented and use a very wrong strategy, you won't go anywhere. But anyway, the artists that I believe have got a serious future include artists like Mbeu, artists like Tendai Mawengeni, artists like Batsi Shasha. Yeah, there are many. And my son, because he's also an artist. There are many artists that I think they have a future, but like I said before, they really need to work on having the right strategies, because without a good strategy, you won't go anywhere with the music industry. I am sure you have a lot of artists that you said, Ningi Ningi is going to go far, blah, blah, blah. Then after some time, you see they are still nowhere. You can spend your life being an upcoming artist the rest of your life if you don't work your strategies well. The strategies include even the type of music that you choose to be identified with. Because there are some type of music that will get you a lot of airplay in Zimbabwe, but you cannot fly to go and play in places like France where there are no Zimbabweans. And then there are certain genres that will just get you girls who will just scream at your shows and snatching. So you really need to play your cards very well if you are entering the music industry. And another problem in Zimbabwe is that there are certain genres that can trend a lot and but give you no money. Because in Zimbabwe sometimes there's a difference between what trends and what sells. Like for example, Mbira musicians, they don't trend. You find them with 400 views on YouTube, but if you go to their shows, they're always full and they're always flying. And this next question is, who is your best musician to ever come out of Africa? That one is easy. My best musician to ever come out of Africa is none other than Oliver Mtukudzi. He was well known all around the world. He played in Japan, he played in France. He would play in areas where you don't even see a single black human being, and he was popular. In South Africa, they didn't even understand his lyrics, but he was very popular there. So my best musician to come out of Africa is Oliver Mtukudzi. Then I go to Oswald Muranda. His question is, what is causing the lack of diversity in Sungura music? It's simple. It's because everybody is copying Alec Macheso. There's a thin line between being inspired by somebody and being or trying to sound like somebody or copying somebody. So the majority of current Sungura artists, they are all copying Alec Macheso. So that's causing the lack of diversity in Sungura music. Remember, during the analog era, we had Leonard Embo, he was playing Sungura, we had System Tajida, that's Sungura. Samuel Chimbeti, he had his own brand of Sungura called Dendera. With John Chibadra, all those guys were playing Sungura, but their sound was different. Right now, everybody's sounding like Macheso. And some are even copying his lisp. They are copying Chirim Chagijaj, copying everything. And it's causing lack of diversity. His second question is also interesting. He says, is jazz music sellable in Zimbabwe? And the answer is yes. It has its own market. And usually jazz music attracts the affluent, those guys who have got money. That's why jazz shows are expensive. It's only that these days, because of COVID, we don't have shows, so that's a hindrance. But jazz music is very sellable in Zimbabwe, and it sells a lot, and they've got very well-paying shows and corporates. You know what? Jazz musicians are known to be very smart up there, and even the way they dress. So as a result, they always attract corporate jobs. So it's a sellable genre, but every genre has got its pros and its cons. Jazz worldwide, it's not in the mainstream. It's not one of those music that trends a lot. It doesn't trend a lot, but it does have its own market if you apply the proper business principles. Then I go to Peter Chirima's question. He says, after recording my music, how do I promote it? Yeah, these days it's not difficult because we no longer have record labels. But in short, the answer is you need to take your music to the radio stations. You need to take your music to the newspapers. You need to promote it on social media. You need to do a very good video, because these days it's no longer about the audio only. People want to see how you look like and how you present yourself on music videos. So it's all about the business side of things, because like I always say, talent is not enough. So it's not enough to have a good album. You need to have a good album, and you need to push it. You need to know the business side of things and market it very well. So I hope I answered you very well. Then I go to Kolias Chiruka's question. He says, how did you meet Derek Mpofu? Okay, first time I met Derek Mpofu was when he was working for Gospel Train as a music producer. But we didn't talk very much. He was still very young, and we didn't have much in common. I'll just meet him there when I came for recordings. But around 2010, I used to work with Esther Mukazika before she relocated to UK. She was the in-house big vocalist. She would come and beg all the artists that recorded here. And she's the one who said to me, you know what, I've got a brother of mine, he's a very good vocalist, you should try him. Because sometimes we'd get artists who asked me to look for a male back vocalist. So I tried him once, and I was amazed by how he sang. So from that time, I started to invite him to come and do back vocals. And then I hired him as an assistant engineer. But in 2011, I produced one song for him called Chisikana Changu Zimbabwe. And the song blew up, and it became very popular, and he started getting a lot of jobs, and he was appointed the Good William Ambassador for Environment, and he became very busy, so he had to quit his job as my assistant engineer. But because of spending time together in the studio, we discovered that we had a lot in common despite the age difference. So we became very close, and that's why we became friends. And this one is coming from Zwaitwa Chimbuganda. His question is, what made you last long in this tough industry? That's a very good question. Yeah, like I always say, I'm going to repeat again, talent is not enough in the music business. So I'm always trying to find ways to market myself so that I always remain relevant. Even like what I'm doing now, I'm even marketing myself. So I always look for ways on how to market myself, to move with the trends, to move with the times, so that I don't remain in 1946 when everybody else is in 2022. So I think I attribute that to maybe my business decisions. Yeah, I hope I answered you well. This one is coming from Ezaiti Nemara. He says, which books do you read that give you so much wisdom? Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you for such a compliment. But I love reading. Like I said before, I don't enjoy movies. So my entertainment list is very limited. So one of the things that I do is I read books a lot. And some of the books that I read, some of them are close by. Like this one called 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And this one, The Art of War by Robert Greene. And this one is called African Music, Power and Being in Colonial Zimbabwe. It was written by Mozi Chikowero. It teaches you a lot about how Zimbabwe was colonized mentally, not physically. Because the physical part, most people know it, but the mental colonization, very few people know about it. And the other book is this one, Talent is Not Enough. It's a very interesting book. And another book that is very interesting that I love very much is called Zimbabwe Township Music, written by Joyce Chenje Makwenda. And also with the coming of the internet, there are also very short articles on the internet. I also read those a lot. I love those because they go straight to the point. No introduction, no acknowledgements. They don't waste your time. They just go straight to the point. And I also love watching documentaries, because there are a lot of documentaries on online. So online on YouTube and so forth. So if I'm wise, I attribute that to those. And I also love listening to speakers. And some of my favorite speakers include Jordan Peterson, Miles Monroe, the late Miles Monroe, Bishop T.D. Jakes, Dr. Farrell. He wrote a very interesting book called The Boy Crisis. It's one book that I researched on a lot when I wrote my book called Men Vacuum. And I also like listening to Arthur Marara. He's a local speaker and he speaks a lot of sense. So if I'm wise, I attribute it to those people. Then I go to David Maruma, who had 4 questions. He says, how can musicians improve their lives? Okay, I always say this and I always get a lot of backlash. And what I say is, if you're a musician, music is a very low income industry in Zimbabwe. And so my advice to musicians is you must have a main hustle and then make music your side hustle until music can pay you more than the main hustle. Then you can become full-time. Of course, it's true that I came into the music industry full-time without a side hustle, and I really suffered. I remember other times when we had flops. We'll be out of Harare and somewhere Maprazi and no food, and sometimes would end up roasting people's maize. So I would encourage anybody to get into the music industry full-time at once. And then his second question is, at what stage does a new artist need a manager? As soon as you start, you need a manager, because a manager handles the business side. So it's wise to start with a manager as soon as you start. And then the third question is, how do you identify a good manager? A good manager is just somebody who is aware of the business side of the music industry. It can be anybody. People like the Jackson 5, their father was the manager. The same thing with Beyonce, their father was the manager. And or you can look for anybody, it's either your friend or your brother, your sister, anybody who understands the business side of music. And it doesn't have to be a musician, it can be anybody. Then the fourth question is, how can one use technology to improve their music career? That one is simple. You sell your music via all your social media handles. You can market yourself via all your social media handles. I'm sure there are a lot of artists that we have known through social media alone. Artists like Van Choga and even comedians. Comedians like Madam Boss, Comic Pastor. Those people, even if you ask them, they'll tell you that before technology, it would have been difficult for them to be popular. Right now they've become very big brands because of social media. So you can market yourself through social media, just like what other artists have done, just like comedians like Mighty, Madam Boss, Prosper, Ngomashi, and everybody has done. So it's a very good tool. Then I go to Victor Majaya's questions. He says, do you know Simon Chimbetu personally? Well, when Simon Chimbetu was still around, he was very big and was not known, so I doubt if he really knew me. But I know that one time we were advised to look for big artists and seek for permission to play during their break times. And Simon Chimbetu is one person that I approached in 1989, and he allowed us to play during his break time. Simon Chimbetu was very humble. He's somebody who was very humble. He could speak to anybody. So I don't know if he knew me, but his son, Sulu mfano wangu tunoziwana Stereka, even played on his album Gunship. I think I played about 3 or 4 songs on Gunship together with Trust Samende. And his second question is, do you love Dendera? Yes, I love Dendera a lot. To those who follow my Facebook channel, I even did a Dendera tribute to Simon Chimbetu with my son, and a lot of people love it. His third question is, how do you rate Nodza Nodza? Nodza Nodza is a very good guitarist, and he's a very close friend of mine as well. So I think I've answered you well. We move to Gift Fungai Nyamayaro's question. He says, how are you helping young artists to be disciplined as you? Thank you for the compliment. What I do is, if you ask everybody who records with me, I do have a time where I lecture to the artists. My studio sessions are partly music creation and partly lectures. And some of the youngsters, they even bring cameras to the studio, so that every time I start speaking to them, they start recording. So I speak a lot to artists and tell them of all the dangers in the music industry, how to handle my groupies, my baby, my musicians, telling them, guys, so avoid this, avoid that, blah blah blah. Okay, then his his second question is, have you ever thought of opening a music school? Yes, I have. I have such dreams, but to do that you need money. And right now things are not looking well in the Zimbabwe music industry because of the bad economy, because of COVID and so forth. So I would really love to open a music school, but it needs money, and I don't have the money. And then Kurewa Seka Makwabarara. Hey, that's a very complicated surname. His first question is, do you ever get writer's block? Okay, writer's block is when you have no inspiration to write. Yes, I do have that, and sometimes every musician or every artist or every writer do have such moments. And there are moments where you just need inspiration, and it happens with everybody. And then this second question is, how do you deal with it? Okay, I take a break. Sometimes when I'm busy writing something and I suddenly lose my inspiration, I just stop there and look for another time where I have inspiration. Then the next question, I combined a number of people because they asked almost the same questions. And the list of people goes like, the list of these people, there is Munyarazi Damiton, Daniel Mususa, Milton C. Sean, Brian Alumenda, Bandit President, Mike Mumanyi, Tapiwa Madziva, and Sias Orik. They all asked questions that were very similar, so I combined the questions. The first question is, how do I learn guitar? How do I learn lead guitar? Okay, for you to learn the lead guitar, you need to learn the rhythm guitar. You can't be a good lead guitarist who doesn't know how to play the rhythm guitar. So you need to learn your chords and everything. So what you need to do is you need to look for somebody who can play, somebody who can teach. So it has to be one person who can play, who can also teach. But there are people who can play but who can't teach. There are people who can teach who can't play. So you need a combination of both in the same person. Then number 2, what type of exercises can one do for finger dexterity and speed as a lead guitarist? Okay, the exercises you need to do, you need to know your skills and practice your skills. And one thing about learning guitar that I need to tell everybody is that it's not about how good your teacher is. It's all about how much you practice. Because a lot of people ask me, how much time do I need, or how many lessons do I need for me to be a good guitarist? It all depends with how much you practice on your own. Like with me, my lessons are only 30 minutes. Because I teach the same way that I was taught with my guitar teachers, and the first person who taught me my first lessons on a proper standard guitar was a gentleman called Last Saidi. And his lessons will never pass 30 minutes. He will just show you what to play. He will give you what to go and practice. And then you go and practice on your own. He will make sure that you clearly get what you need to go and practice. And then you practice on your own. And I would practice a lot. The second time he saw me, he was shocked. I was already part of a band because I had spent a lot of time practicing. So most people, one problem, if you show him, you need to put your fingers there and there, just because he has seen where you are supposed to put the fingers, he thinks it's okay, and then they don't practice. And then they think just because you are a good guitarist, so automatically your skills will just transfer to them just because you are teaching them. It doesn't work like that. You need to work on your own. If you know where to put the fingers, it's not enough. You need to be able to play fluently without thinking, without planting your fingers, and that comes through practice. There is no magic with music. So it's not about how good your teacher is, it's about how much you practice on your own. And then the third question is, how long does it take to learn to play? I think I've answered that one. So let's move to the next question. It's coming from Barbara Mangoma Masenga. She says, what type of guitar can I buy if I want to learn Sungura music guitar? Okay, there's no guitar that is made for Sungura or for rock or for jazz or for any other genre of music. It's what you play that define the genre of music that you are playing. Okay, the next question is coming from Makli Matenganzara. And his question is, what makes you so humble? Oh, okay. Once again, thank you for such a compliment. I think easy gains without a struggle, they breed entitlement and pride. So I believe that the struggles that I went through, they always make me humble. You know what happens is people like me, we have been chased away from the stage so many times. We have been booed away from the stage so many times. We have been chased away from the studios many times. The first time you get somebody telling you that you are good, you praise God. This guy says I'm good. This guy says I'm a good guitarist. And I remember the first time a professional musician told me that I'm a good guitarist. I thought he was just being sarcastic. I thought he was making fun of me because I had been criticized for a long time. I had been booed off stage. I remember even when the other time we asked for a jam session from Solomon Kore. He had a show in Lockingville. And we wanted to gain experience in playing electric guitars, and we asked for a jam if we could play during break time. And when we went on stage, people didn't like it. We were chased off stage. I remember this guy was right in front of me. So I went through a lot in the music industry, through a lot of struggles. So every time somebody tells me that you're a good guitarist or gives me any type of compliment, I really, really thank God for that, because I know how it is to be chased away from the stage. I know how it is to be booed off stage. And every simple achievement that I've made in life, I had to struggle for it. So every time you struggle for something, when you get it, it really humbles you. Because I'm sure you know people like Strive Masiwa. I was reading his articles on Facebook, what he went through when he started his company, Econet. And I'm sure you know Strive Masiwa is one of the richest people in Africa. I think in Zimbabwe is the richest person. And look at how humble he is. You never see Steve Masiwa telling you, I'm rich, I'm wearing a $2,000 shirt, I'm driving an expensive car or anything. He never says that. That's a sign that shows you that this guy is mature, he went through a lot, and he doesn't have poverty mentality. And then the next question is coming from Talent Masiwa. Do you see the coincidence here? I was just talking about Steve Masiwa, and then I have somebody called Talent Masiwa here. He says, he or she says, I don't know if it's a male or female, what advice do you give to an artist who has a sound playing in his head but doesn't know how to put it across to the producer? That's a very good question, Talent. Right. I see that a lot with a lot of musicians. They've got something, they want something or from you as a musician or as a producer, but they can't express it. And sometimes they just know how to say what they don't want, but they can't express what they want. And the number one solution is for you to play an instrument. Because when you learn to play an instrument, it increases your understanding of music. Your musical intelligence grows. There's certain things that only people who play instruments know that everybody else doesn't. There's a difference between mutereri, a listener, and a practitioner. And once you start playing an instrument, you move from being a listener to a practitioner. And once you're a practitioner, there are certain things that only practitioners know. If you don't play an instrument, even if you are a singer, there are certain things that you don't know about music that are only known by people who play instruments. So my answer to you, Talent Masiwa, is learn to play an instrument. And you'll thank me later because it will open a whole new world to you. Okay? His second question is, how does an artist know which producer is best for him or her? That's another very good question. A lot of artists make a mistake of having what we call halo effect. Halo effect is when somebody is good. For example, if somebody is a very good football player, and then you just assume, just because he's a very good football player, then you just assume that this guy is also good with tennis, is also good with cricket, just because he's a good footballer. It also happens in the music industry. There are producers who are very good, like for example, very good Sungura music producers. And then you are a dancehall music artist, you approach that guy, and then you start wondering why your music is not coming out well. Because it's very rare for one person to know everything. So you must do your research, look for a proper producer who is suitable for the type of music that you want to do, and also research on how professional they are, because right now we're hearing a lot of complaints concerning professionalism in the music industry. So I hope I answered you well. Then this one is Bright April. His question is, what did Debbie Metcalf do right that helped to be so successful? That's another good question, Bright. But first of all, the artist has to be sellable as well. You have to be somebody who can be sold easily. And the one thing about Oliver Mtukudzi is he was very easy to sell because one, he was very original and very authentic. Promoters, they value two things: originality and authenticity. Originality is sounding like yourself. You don't need to sound like anybody. Like Zuita, most like what most youngsters are doing to try to copy Japreza, to copy Alec Macheso, to copy Babana Maicharamba. With that formula, you don't go anywhere. I'm sure of all the people that copied Macheso, there's not even a single one that became an icon. All people that copied Charamba, all the people that copied Japreza, there's not even a single artist. So that's another sellable thing, because Oliver Mtukudzi sounded like himself. Number two, he sounded like where he comes from. Because on the international market, I've played on a lot of international festivals. You will never find a rumba artist that comes from Zambia, Botswana, or anywhere else. Or rumba artists that are invited at international platforms come from DRC. It's very rare for you to find an R&B artist that comes from Tanzania on an international festival. So my point is, sounding like where you come from is a very serious selling point. It's a very serious business decision. So Oliver Mtukudzi, he had all that. Now coming to what Debbie did, Debbie was a very good manager. To me, she's the best manager to have ever walked on the face of Zimbabwe. She knew her business side very well. She had very good business strategies. And one thing that she told me that she advised Oliver Mtukudzi when she started managing him was that he needed good musicians that were as unique as his voice. Oliver Mtukudzi has got a very unique voice. So it was Debbie Metcalf who came with the idea of hiring very good musicians. At one time, I think she even took over the job of hiring musicians. Even when I joined the band, she's the one who invited me to join the band. I hope I answered you very well. Then Mark Makanaka's question goes like, how do we go about if we want to do a documentary about you? It's simple, you just call me and then we talk. Then Fanwe Ndebele's question is, number one, looking at the current economic meltdown, how can the music industry be revived? That one is a very tough question, because I think we need a holistic approach. We need the government to play a part. We need the musicians to play a part. We need the radio stations to play a part, because right now a lot of radio stations, we've got a number of radio stations that are just promoting foreign music. And I've traveled around the world, areas where music is a very good business. Their radio stations, they promote their own music. Like in USA, they will never play any music from anywhere else. They just play their own music. I know some people say, you need to know what's happening in other countries. We are now a global village. Americans, they don't care about the global village. They just support their own music. They support their own. So it's a holistic approach. Also, the economy has to be right. And that one, I think I'll have to do a video just concentrating on that question, because it's a very broad question. And then the second question is it viable to solely depend on music? I think I've answered that earlier, but let me address it again. It's very difficult to just depend on music alone in Zimbabwe. It's only very few people who can manage to do that. It's a very low income industry. And then number two, our population is very small. If you look at countries where music is very lucrative around Africa, like South Africa, they've got more than 60 million people. Tanzania have got more than 60 million people. DRC has got more than 90 million people. Nigeria has got more than 200 million people. USA has got more than 300 million people. And Zimbabwe are only 15 million. So it's very difficult for one to make it to survive solely on music in Zimbabwe, and especially with the economic turn down that we have, and worse still with this COVID thing, it's now even worse. So the next question is coming from Emmanuel Chikwaba. He says, are you going to record an album with your son? Yeah, we thought about it, talked about it, but we haven't started anything. He's very busy. He's now one of the busiest session guitarists in town. And I'm also busy with my studio and with school. I'm doing a music degree with MSU. So I hope I answered you well. We are going to do it, but we don't know when. And then Ruben Nuda has got two questions. How do you rate Nicolas Zacharias' lead guitar? Nicolas Zacharias is a very good guitarist, and he's left-handed, and most left-handed guitarists are very good. I remember Jimi Hendrix is considered to be the greatest guitarist in the Western world, and he was left-handed. In Zimbabwe, we've got a bass player called Josh Meek. So he's one of the best players to ever walk the face of Zimbabwe, and he's a left-handed bass player. I know most of you might not know him, but Josh Meek is a wicked bass player and he's a left-handed. So Nicolas Zacharias is a very good guitarist. And then Cordell Howe says, of all the instruments, why did you choose the guitar? I really don't know. I just fell in love with the instrument ever since I was a kid. Ever since I was a child, I just fell in love with the instrument. The earliest I can remember seeing a guitar, I think I was around the age 5, 6. Every time I saw somebody holding a guitar, my heart would beat very, very fast. I just fell in love with the instrument. Then question number 2 says, how does it feel to be playing in front of thousands? Yeah, first days you become very nervous before you go on stage. But as time goes on, the nervousness goes away. So it feels very good to be playing in front of thousands. But after playing for a long time, that enthusiasm starts going away. Right now, mine is a bit low, especially after the passing away of Oliver Mukundu and Chioniso. I think I lost a bit of that enthusiasm to play live. So that's why most of the time I'm just in the studio. Working in the studio, and I do live shows here and there. Then there's Progress Marufu. He says, have you ever thought of becoming a solo artist? Yes. My first dream was to become a guitarist, a vocalist, and a solo artist. And my first dream was to become a reggae artist. I'm a serious reggae fan, so I wanted to become a reggae artist. So as time went on, I discovered that I was not a very good singer. And I'm a good composer, but I'm not a very good singer. So it made me to change my focus. That's why I changed. But still, I recorded. So far, I've got 9 albums to my name. Like I said before, I don't know what happens with us producers. When you do your own music, it doesn't really blow up the same way the music that you do for other musicians blow up. I don't know what happens there. Then there's Nathan Lee Maenza. He says, how do you mix Sungura vocals? I think that one, it needs a proper tutorial, because it's a loaded question. It has got a lot of things to be covered. So we'll leave it for a tutorial. I'll do a tutorial on that one. And then Tawanda Shua says, how many albums do you record with the Black Spirits? I worked with Oliver Mukundu for 4 years. So I think I did 4 albums, 1 album per year, but I'm forgetting the 4th album. But the ones I remember is Tsivo Now and Tsimba Itsoka. And then Tawanda Movie says, who do you rate the most underrated dancehall artist and why? Okay, when it comes to being underrated, you underrate yourself by your business practices. The best way to avoid being underrated is to market yourself very well and be very careful with your business practices. And I think I've spoken a lot about that. So my answer is simple. You are not underrated by anybody. You underrate yourself. It's the same as, for example, if Coca-Cola releases a new product and people don't know about it, do we blame the people for underrating the new product? Or we blame Coca-Cola for not advertising that product very well? The answer is simple. We blame the company for not advertising their product very well. So you don't blame the audience or ordinary people for underrating you. You underrate yourself by your business practices. And we've done so. We've got another issue of singing obscene lyrics and being known for taking drugs and so forth. That one, it undermines your career, because the business community don't want to work with people who sing obscene lyrics, who indulge in drugs. So if you check, you will notice that some of those that struggle to make it in that genre of music is people who sing obscene lyrics, because your music cannot be played on radio and no one wants to associate with you. So to answer your question in short, no one is underrated. You underrate yourself because of your business practices. Then Fred Lectondlana says, may you do a collab with me this year? Yes, but I'm not much of an artist. Every time I record my music, it's not necessarily that I want to market myself as an artist. It's usually because I want to market the studio and my sound. So, but if you want to work with me, we can try. I've done a few collabs with a few artists, but many artists, they refuse to do a collab with me. They just want me to produce them. When I did my projects and asked them to collaborate with me, a very good number of artists refused. Maybe it's because I'm not a good singer, I'm just a producer and a guitarist. Then Prince Leicester Musemburi says, can an artist be a singer, a producer and a songwriter on his own project? Yeah, it's not advisable, because what happens is if you produce yourself, I think there's a certain level of overexcitement that overclouds your judgment, and you don't even notice where you are getting things wrong. I've noticed that with the coming in of technology, many artists want to produce themselves. And if you notice, even the artists that used to be under Grammar Records, those artists that used to be under record labels, the moment they started producing themselves, I'm sure you can notice that a lot of them are not producing hits anymore, because they don't have anybody to push them, don't have anybody to impress. Was long back before artists when artists were under record labels, they would bring a product to the studio and they would be told, go back and work more, so to impress the producers. That's why artists used to produce hits a lot. Even in the Western world is more strict with artists. There is what we call creative control. That is the power to decide what's going on the album, what's right and what's wrong. They never give that control to artists. That's why in the Western world, there are composers who are known for composing for a lot of artists. Like right now, there's a composer called Max Martin. Is the one composing for a lot of American artists, including your Taylor Swifts, all the popular artists in the Western world. But there are only a very few artists in the Western world who were given that creative control. I think I remember Prince and Barry White. Those are some of the very few artists that were given creative control. So my advice is, it's not advisable. I know Zimbabwean artists, they don't want anybody to write songs for them. They'd rather go to a funeral and steal a song rather than being given a song that was written by somebody else. And it's not a good idea, because there are people who are very good singers but who are not good songwriters, and there are people who are good songwriters like me but who are not good singers. So we should work together. And I've written songs for Willem Tite, for Pamela Zulu, for a number of people, and they turned out very well. And his second question is it wise to have all these people working on one project as opposed to having one producer do everything? Yes, that's another good question. I prefer to have a project that is a number of people working on it. Even if I'm the producer, I prefer to have I can play all the instruments. I can play the bass, I can play the mbira, I can play keyboards, I can play lead guitar, and I can program drums very well, but I always prefer to have a team of people working on a single project. But at times it's expensive, and with the economic downturn that we have right now, most artists prefer to work with one producer who plays everything. But I don't think it's a good idea, but it's just a plan B that we are doing because of the economic situation. Then we have Simbarashe Mazarire. His question is, you mentioned that talent is not enough. So how do I make it as a vocalist, instrumentalist or producer? I think I've covered that question before. You just need to be careful of the business side of things. And I think I've mentioned what the business side of things entails. Then there's this brother of mine called We Guitare Tafi. He says, how do you work with upcoming artists? Okay, the way I work with upcoming artists is the way I work with everybody. In my studio, I'm very strict on time. Everything has to start on time. If you come late, I charge you for coming late. And you don't enter another artist session. I don't want an audience when you are still working on something. So I don't allow people to come and sit in. And the other thing that I do is I give a lot of tips, a lot of industry tips and advice to artists. So that's how I work with new artists. That's how I work with everybody. And even older artists. I remember this one popular artist, I was telling him, you know what, I don't like the way you have changed your music. You are now sounding more Nigerian than Zimbabwean. It's not good for you. So I don't give advice only to new artists, I give advice to everybody. Then we go to Blessing Mugwagwa. He says, I would want to be a successful music producer. Can you help me achieve my dream? I can only give you tips, but the biggest input has to come from you. Because no matter how much tips I give you, it's like taking you can take a donkey to the river, but you don't force it to drink the water. So I can give you tips. It's up to you to choose to use the tips or not. Then Nyashanu Mofu Munjeri says, why is Mbira still not accepted in church when Wosho and Goma are accepted? Okay, I mentioned this book earlier on, written by Professor Mozichkowero. This book explains that point very well. In Zimbabwe, when we were colonized by the British, that's the time also Christianity came. And for the simple reason that Mbira was used during Bira ceremonies, it was banned from churches, or it was very much discouraged. In fact, the way the gospel was preached in Zimbabwe and most parts of Africa, it was like they were telling people that everything African was demonic. Even if you had a Shona name or Ndebele name, you were forced to or encouraged to have what they called a Christian name, which means an English name. So everything African was despised, and as a result, up to now, Mbira is not accepted in church. But I need to point out one thing. If you read European music history, there was a time when they used to have what they called Gregorian chants. That was a type of a genre of music that they used to sing, which was just vocal. And they banned all the instruments, including the pianos, the keyboards, and everything, because they were also used in rituals. So even the Western instruments that you play, the keyboards, the organ, and everything, one time they were also banned from the church, from the Western church, because they were also used during rituals. So Mbira, if you say Mbira was used during Wadzimu rituals, so we are not going to use it in church, the keyboards that you use and the guitars and everything, they were also used in Western rituals as well. But you are now using them in church. So we need to decolonize our minds as Africans and stop demonizing our culture. I know some people even say Mutupo Ndema Demoni. There's nothing wrong with the totems. Those were our surnames as Africans. I hope I answered you well. And this second question is, are there any prospects of you doing a music workshop in Cape Town? If you invite me, I'll come. I have no problems with that. Then question number 3 is it too late for someone over 30 to learn guitar or mbira? It's never too late to learn an instrument, as long as you put enough time into learning. Remember I said your improvement depends on how much you practice as an individual. It's not dependent on the teacher, it's dependent on you. Then the next question is coming from Jabulo Nyandoro. Is it true that there is sexual promiscuity in gospel music that is swept under the carpet? My way. I knew that some people are going to ask me very difficult questions. Okay. We have very good gospel musicians, very good people in the music fraternity. So let's not paint all of them with the same brush. We have got very serious, very committed Christians, very devout Christians in Zimbabwe. But everywhere you go, you always find hypocrites in every sector, in every industry, in every type of work. So yes, in Zimbabwe we do have them, people like that. And it's one thing that gave me a serious culture shock when I became a Christian in 1994. I was shocked to find that there are people who can come straight from adultery and hold a microphone, close their eyes and weep. And I would ask myself, why are they crying after we know what they were doing 15 minutes ago? Already they are holding a mic and crying. So it gave me a lot of questions about gospel music, because you know how it is. Before you work with somebody, you have a different picture, and when you start working with them, you have a totally different picture. That what happened with me with gospel music. Before I entered the gospel music fraternity, I thought everything was good, everybody was hallelujah. But I was shocked to see that there are hypocrites there, there are crooks as well who use the Bible to brainwash you and underpay you. But like I said, we also have very good Christians, very good devout Christians in the gospel music industry. So let's not paint everybody with the same brush. Then Malvin Maguma says, do artists perform better when drunk? Okay, it's a very popular notion that for you to be a good artist, for you to perform well, you need to be drunk or high on something, and it's a very wrong notion. If you know artists like Oliver Mtukudzi never drank or smoked weed. Wingy D doesn't smoke weed or drink or take any drugs. Lucky Dube, he never drank, smoked any drug or anything, but he was a good performer. I think if you're a true artist, you know how to transform from being Clive into Mono. You know how to transform very well from being Wallace Chirumuko to Wingy D. You know how to transform yourself from your everyday family life to a wild person on stage. I think another good international example is Beyonce. On stage she's wild, but off stage she's the most humblest person. So you can perform very well. If you're a true artist, you don't need alcohol, you don't need any drug for you to perform well. It has to come from inside. You train yourself. Then Talent Mutaza says, have you ever thought of setting up Monolith studios outside the Harare? Yes, I have, but I don't know if it's viable, because we now have studios in every street in Harare, so I don't know if it's viable. I'll do my research. Then Itai David Chiwanga says, what's the best lesson you learned from Tuku? The best lesson I learned from Tuku is that being original pays a lot. Because I remember when we used to play with him, we played on big stages and sometimes with very big artists, but you never be ashamed or you never feel nervous to go on stage because you'll be playing something from your country and no one will come and say that's not the way to play it. So that's one big lesson I learned from Tuku. I also learned that to be humble pays a lot. And also my stage work improved a lot when I worked with Oliver Mtukudzi. I used to watch him a lot and learned a lot from him. And I learned, I think I really need a full program to explain what I learned from Oliver Mtukudzi. I think working with Oliver Mtukudzi was my first university. Yeah, and then Besta Bete Mapete says, what inspired you to be a music producer? You know what? Like I said before, I'm featured on more than 1,000 albums. I've played a lot on different albums. So, because of spending a lot of time in the studios, I started admiring music production. And to cut a long story short, I think that's what inspired me to become a music producer. Then Taurai Malibongwe says, as a left-handed person, can I be taught how to play by a right-handed guitarist? Yes, you can be taught, and nothing will stop you. Then Arison Karume says, what's the difference between analog and the digital era? Okay. The digital era especially when it comes to recording music, it brought in convenience. It made life very easy for music production. Number one, you get to see what you are working on. During the analog era, you just had to rely on your ears, but with the digital era, you can actually see the music and it's very easy to edit. And the equipment also became cheaper. That's why right now we have a studio in every street. Right now there are people recording music, even on an iPhone. The first person to receive an award for recording music on a phone was Curtis Fields. He completed a full album that he recorded on an iPhone. So the biggest difference between the analog era and the digital era is convenience. But when it comes to sound, the analog era had a better sound than the digital era sound. If you ask any engineer, they'll tell you that analog sound had a certain warmth to it, which you don't find with the digital era sound. The digital era sound is very clean, but it has got a certain type of brightness that you don't find with the analog systems. So that's the main difference between analog and digital. In fact, it's a whole lot. That's That's a loaded question that needs its own video or its own program to explain. But those are the main basic ones that I can explain. Right now we've got artists around the world that refuse to record with the digital software. Artists like a reggae band called Groundation is from America. They said they will not record with digital software. They want to record with analog. So it proves a point which says the latest is not the best. But still, there's a whole lot of advantages with the digital software. Thank you very much to everybody who sent their questions. We'll meet again on the next episode. Thank you.
Monolio Studio, the harmony of quality and professionalism.